Hey, welcome to Study Break. My name is Megan Mead, and tonight we're going to be helping students procrastinate from their homework by giving them free coffee drinks and asking them a thought-provoking question. So let's get started, shall we?
So my name is Dan, and I'm studying psychology. It's been pretty great so far, and tonight I've been getting, I've been getting my study on with a few things. I think the main thing was my sociology class homework.
My name is Rebecca Jane. I'm an ICS major, and I was writing a paper for anthropology.
I'm Matthew Valsey. I'm a biochemistry major, and I was talking to this wonderful man right here about his Tory paper.
I'm Gregory Ambrose. I'm an English major, and we were discussing my Tory paper before this wonderful interview.
What we're going to ask you about is kind of issues having to do with church and state. There's been a lot of things about basically this issue in the news lately, especially with, have you heard about the Houston subpoena?
I have not.
Basically, Houston was trying to pass anti-discrimination laws against LGBTQ people, like trying to pass laws that would protect them from discrimination from like private businesses and things like that. And a bunch of the churches were getting together to sign petitions to try to stop the law from passing. And so, like, there were pastors that were using the pulpit as a means to try to get people, to basically facilitate people to get to vote against the law to keep it from passing. And lawmakers,
because it's affecting churches.
Yeah. And so lawmakers in Houston then were issuing subpoenas to pastors trying to basically censor sermons so that they couldn't say anything about the upcoming law or anything that was anti-LGBTQ. And so that there's been a lot of drama with that in the past few days. And so that's kind of the context of the conversation and why we're talking about it right now. Do you have an opinion on whether church and state should be two realms that should influence each other, or do you think they should stay separate?
I think one thing that's important to note is this whole idea of like the wall of separation isn't anything that's like constitutional in and of itself. It's in a letter from Thomas Jefferson. It's not even like something that's officially documented in any of the, in anything really. It's just a letter. And furthermore, the way in which it was written was to prevent the government from encroaching upon the rights of our own freedom of religion. Like Constitution says, Congress shall make no rule on the establishment of religion. I'm not getting that perfectly right. So I don't know. I mean, even if these churches are, from what I understood correctly, like trying to get signatures for, what was it, petitions you said? To block out this legislation that would supposedly prevent discrimination of LGBT people, right? And I think they have the freedom to do that. I think that's in their, if they want to preach that message, they have the freedom to do that. It's free speech. Even if it's not necessarily right. But I do think it would be wrong to do that conversely. I don't think that the government has the right to tell them they can't be doing that. I think it's kind of a one-way street.
I feel that it's important that that our government is not ruling what goes on in any religious community, as long as it is, in general, not harming anybody's rights, then it's not the government's job to step in and say, no, you can't talk about this or you can't do that. However, I also think it's probably an appropriate placement for a pastor to be talking about political things at the pulpit, especially with such a sensitive subject. That's something I feel you should be talking to people one-on-one about more. So it just kind of sounds like a really messy situation in general where it needs to be more sensitively taken care of.
The individuals in the church, they do have a right to protest and to say that they do not believe that the LGBT should have these rights. And that's because they have the right of speech. The individuals do. I do not believe it is right for these individuals, and particularly the pastors of the church, to use the church to to support, to, I guess,
Act like a platform.
act like a platform and support their views?
I think that's a great question. From what you told me, that sounds like a pretty serious issue to where I would hope initially that the Christians respond more than anything in a loving manner. I think this is something that may not be being handled in the best way because it's a very new thing with, trying to change things that are very deep in structure and whatnot. But I would hope, first of all, Christians respond with love because that's going to be the biggest kind of change for this kind of situation. But as for the political side of it, I would think you have to be very careful melding politics and the church. And once you start doing things like censoring sermons or whatever's going on with those details, I don't know, there probably come certain questions of what the limits are to certain things, and really never want to infringe upon freedom of speech or the basic freedoms that come with Americans. But I think in a simple way, I would just advise caution, and I just want my fellow brothers and sisters to do so in a loving manner.
And I know in the beginning, one of the reasons why that idea became so prevalent for American people was people were gung-ho about making sure that the church was protected from the state because we had come from England where the church was utterly ruled by the state and had no freedom from it. And it's interesting because now when people talk about this idea of the separation of church and state, most of the time people are talking about it in the context of the state being protected from the church.
Right, completely the other way around.
Yeah, why do you think that switch happened?
Well, it sounds like almost in this specific situation, it's going both directions, where the church was kind of infringing on the state, but then also the state was trying to infringe on the church's rights to do things. And I feel like that needs to go both ways, where definitely what you believe in your faith should affect the way that you vote and the way that you look at life and your worldview and all that stuff, but it shouldn't be to the point where we're infringing on other people's rights.
It's like the rise of secular thought and skepticism is maybe when people started to think, hey, these religious ideas and religious philosophies have no place in government, which should remain secular, which isn't something I completely agree with, but maybe that's a good indicator.
I can kind of see why it would rise like that, because for the most of American history, the church and the state, I feel like, have been primarily separate, but the state still maintained that they needed to protect the morality of the people.
In either direction, I don't think it's right. I think they should be separate things. We're not in a perfect world yet, and when Christ comes again and new heaven and new earth, then it's perfection and it's going to work well. But at this point in the world, we're not capable because of imperfection to combine church and state, and I think they need to stay separated in a healthy way.
I believe government should focus and be concerned about morality.
Right.
Religion is, if anything, it coincides with morality very much.
Oh yeah.
And I think by taking out religion, if they're trying to take out religion from politics, then they're, for the most part, going to be taking out very much morality.
Do you think that students at Biola, do you think they should be concerned about this issue of the church and state being separated? And do you think that it's important for them to be thinking about it in the coming years?
I think there would be some profit to at least be aware, even to a minimal degree, of things happening like this, to where people can, if anything, pray for it. If anything, people can be aware of possible directions of our country to where they might want to put their voice, because thankfully we can make an impact, even as a minority or whatever. Yeah. So I would definitely encourage being aware.